when I hit the button, it's not the little thing that looks like a recording tape thing, which I'm not sure that anybody actually knows what those are anymore.
What's a tape?
It's a big blue button.
The big blue button
that says record next to it, which I guess that does make sense. I mean, I think the button would be red because most of the time, if you're going with a tape machine motif, you would make the button red because on the tape player, the recording button was also red. Sometimes the record button even sat inside the play button and you had to hit both
at the same
time to record. But not here on our friends at Zencastr. No, it is a blue button, sir.
We got to be different. It's got to be Zen over at Zencastr.
But at Zencastr, thank you for letting us record this podcast. We've got Iron Man number 128.
Nothing for this.
No, we don't. We do thank them for letting us use their service. It's very nice.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
I needed to put that out there that we
don't look a gift horse in the mouth, sir.
Yes. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
We have Iron Man here, and we left off, and Iron Man wasn't looking like he was in very good shape. We had Bethany was very upset about some guy named Alex, and Hammer's army was gone, and Tony was back home drinking.
Yeah.
And here we go. We have another amazing Bob Layton cover. We've got sweaty Iron Man with bloodshot eyes. He's dripping sweat. He's strangely in the suit still, but he's got a jacket on. He looks like he just stayed a night on the streets.
With the suit on, with the suit over the suit.
Yeah, which is so. It looks like Iron Man just came off Skid Row.
Yeah, he's looking very Tony Dark. Like he's in the dark spot.
And we've got it looks like Winston Supreme Canadian whiskey. I don't think that's a real thing, but okay, cool. Is that like Winston Churchill? Is that an allusion to the big drunk prime minister?
It could be, but
World War II.
You got your Canadian whiskeys. I'm trying to think of what that's the.
Too slow. So
I know
we've got approved by Comics Code Authority up in the corner.
Yes,
and we've got. On page 1, when millionaire industrialist Tony Stark, inventor extraordinaire, garbs himself in a solar-charged steel mesh armor, he becomes the world's greatest human fighting machine, the invincible Iron Man, trademark R, but not so much this issue. We've got David Michelinie, writer and plot, John Romita Jr., pencil art, Bob Layton, finished art and plot, John Costanza, letters, Bob Sharen on colors, Roger Stern, editor, and of course, Jim Sharpshooter, editor-in-chief, who... I read an article again of him once again complaining that the suits at Marvel shot down all of his creations in the 80s and it was terrible. And that's why he created New Universe and that amazing character Starbrand and that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. You read all those Starbrand books, right?
I mean, no.
You read all those New Universe books, right? Okay, so we're going to hit up. We've got the story. We've got, finally, issue 128, Demon in a Bottle.
Whoa, we've been building up to this all this time.
And we've got again, maybe over, so part of my criticism of the story, it's been a solid story so far, but has been maybe a little overuse of the narrator. And so we've got Iron Man, or we've got Tony sitting in a chair. He's holding the Iron Man helmet. He's in the suit. He's got the Iron Man murderer. We've got beautiful art by Romita and Layton.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got alcohol everywhere.
Oh,
but then we get the long narration. By definition, a hero is a man who battles against overwhelming odds for a cause, an ideal, or for the lives of innocents. The cause and ideal may vary with the morning headlines, while the innocents in today's world of muddy morality may ultimately prove to be the guilty, which leaves but one constant in the definition that a hero is, above all, a man subject to the pressures and responsibilities far beyond those of his peers, such as the burden must take its toll eventually from even the most valiant warrior. And it is then that the test of a true hero begins. Jeez.
That's a lot. Where
they need to put that in there to get the stamp.
I don't know. I don't know. I think honestly, maybe a third of that text could have been used, or just Iron Man old buddy. I thought I knew, but I don't.
Yeah, and again, you've mentioned this before too. I mean, we're buying these off the newsstand at this point, not and not everybody's read the previous stories in order like we're doing right now. So maybe on the first page, and this probably had some word of mouth, right? You've got Drunk Iron Man on the cover, so people are probably going to find this issue. You need to sort of set up what's happening. Yeah. I get it, but I think the words, the art tells us what is happening, right? So I don't know that we need so much of the text there because I can see it visually.
I mean, and if I was, like, obviously this is a comic written for an older audience. But if I was a kid that happened upon this because my parents were like, "Oh, it's Iron Man. You like Iron Man," and they don't even think like twice because what's Tony up to? He's just being an Iron Man. And they gave me this comic book. I would have checked out at like a third, like not even halfway through the first box because it's just too much.
Well, and it's not something, I mean, obviously these are targeted 16 and up. I think Marvel's pretty famous for that. Maybe 14 and up, but at least, 16 and up. At this point, the Marvel fandom had been growing with Marvel too. I mean, we're in 1979. We're way past 1963, right? So, the audience had grown up with the books. They'd gotten better writers. They'd gotten better art. No offense to the beginning art, but,
it's different. It's changed.
Yeah. I mean, I love Jack Kirby, but this is not Jack Kirby art. This is much cleaner. It's less blocky. And Jack Kirby art fits. I love how Jack Kirby art fits space adventures, right? And the Our Army at War stuff where you want things to be blocky and dirty. But this isn't. This is different. Of course, I don't appreciate the massive line work that Romita Jr. does, but I actually think it really works for this issue.
Yeah, that rug looks amazing.
Yeah, though I think the curtains look ridiculous. So while the rug looks amazing, the curtains are like insane, right?
Yeah.
They're supposed to be solid blue curtains in there. They look like they have stripes.
They have to put the thatch work into it, the hatching. And then, they have to, it's probably really hard to give that type of, we'll do texture to give bellow to each one of those.
Well, and also the suit has a lot of texture in it, which it don't. It like even when they try to color over that texture, it's impossible, right? Like, so it's interesting. But I don't want to get overly critical of the Romita art here because I do think John Romita Jr. drawing this issue in particular, you want it to be sort of hazy, right? You want to have sort of a hazy,
definitely
down feel.
Iron Man has been doing some stuff.
And so we get a little recap, but I think better than the 17-page recap we got a couple issues ago. He's talking to himself. He's talking to the Iron Man helmet. He says, "Hey, I thought you were a friend, but now you're a scapegoat." And this is one where the second page, they literally do the opposite of what they do on the first page. They use the art to recap what has happened. Yeah. So we've got Tony talking to himself, but we've got the Iron Man murderer newspaper, and it gets focused in on. Then we get a picture of a scrapbook with Jarvis in it, or I guess a photo book, something that probably no one has anymore. I remember these. He slid the photos in, and they fit in those little triangles, and they stayed in the book. And you had to kind of bend the photo to sneak it into the last little holder piece. And so a nice little recap of what's been going on in Tony Stark's life and why he's so frustrated. So
Facebook 0.1.
I think that is Facebook 0.1. But then we get to the third page and all the reasons Dan hates Iron Man. So we get Crud, I don't know why I'm being so morose, and he drinks and gives us a wink, and he looks crazy-eyed because he just took a shot. And he puts on the suit, and instead of opening his window, he flies through it.
Yeah.
So now they never did go back to this in the story, but I have no idea how this actually got repaired. It would seem sort of weird. I think somebody would notice if Tony Stark, a millionaire industrialist office, in this case probably billionaire industrialist if you compare it to him now, right?
Yeah.
This would be like there's a big hole in Elon Musk's window at Twitter and nobody noticed. So, okay. I do want to revisit, though, the interview that was done in back issue number 25 by Tomorrow's Publishing. I want to go back to that. And one of the questions that Michelinie and Layton were asked in the interview, they said, it was, I could be wrong, but that really was the first time you had a major superhero being shown with an addiction. Michelinie is quick to point out Denny and O'Neill and Neil Adams did do the Green Lantern, Green Arrow stuff with Speedy. And Layton points out, but not to diminish that story because it's a great story. But the difference was our story was the first time a title character got involved with substance abuse. So I think Marvel, once again, is, bringing it to the forefront. And as we pointed out when we reviewed the Green Lantern, Green Arrow 86, it was like Speedy just shows up out of nowhere, right? We pointed that out. Like, Speedy's here. He hasn't been here for a long time. Now, I thought they weaved it in well by making that a plot point, right? Well, it's because he was out, the Green Lantern and Green Arrow had done their tour of the country before that issues. And then, Speedy was sort of left on his own. So Roy was just there and he ended up getting addicted to heroin. So I do want to go back to this interview. I have a couple more snippets from it, but I do want to revisit back to this. So we go to the next page and Iron Man is flying out crazy man. Yeah. And he sees a train derailment and but he's not listening with his super suit to anything that's going on the ground. Yeah. And everybody in the ground's like, all right, it's a train car full of chlorine, but we're going to ease it back on the tracks and everything's going to be okay. And then Tony flies in and grabs the train and pulls it up, and then the I don't know what those things are called, the attachment bar, whatever, where trains connect. The coupler, yeah. He grabs the coupler, the bar around the coupler, and it breaks as he pulls the train up, and the train falls down to the ground, leaking chlorine gas everywhere. And and they treat this as, they just put some gas masks on, but if you will recall, something pretty major happened in the U.S. A few months ago. Yeah. Back in February in Ohio, chlorine tankers fell off the train tracks and leaked toxic chemicals everywhere. And
was it Iron Man?
Maybe Iron Man did it. 11 tank cars carrying hazardous materials ignited, lit a fire, and chlorine was released. And people are still getting sick in the surrounding areas from that
because of the release of the chlorine gas.
Yeah, and I also lived I went to college at Arkansas State University in Jonesboro, Arkansas, pretty close to West Memphis, that had, and probably still has, I haven't checked, but major chlorine tanks where they made pesticides. And if those chlorine tanks had blown, they would have killed a whole bunch of people in an area. So I appreciate them doing a serious thing, but chlorine gas is not something to mess with. Probably not something I would have chosen to put in my story.
It burns your skin.
Yeah, well, it's mustard gas, right? I mean,
they don't use it in
you inhale it and your lungs melt and you cough them out.
Yeah. Bad news.
So, or maybe they're also just playing off the readership, probably knowing that, right? Assuming you're probably still actually studying World War I in school at this point, and the readership probably knows about the seriousness of it. But okay.
Yeah, fair.
But we're back, and he messes up, and he flies back to headquarters and throws his helmet down and gets out of the suit and has some more alcohol, because that's where he's at. And then there's Bethany.
Oh, hey. Where you been?
And because Mrs. Arbogast is awesome, she lets her in, even though they're not friends. And Bethany's there to help Tony out. So they start to have a little bit conversation. We're finally going to find out who Alex is after all this time.
Secret.
And I will give Michelinie and Layton some credit, because Alex referenced was at least once, right? I know it was a couple issues ago. At least once, but I thought it was 2 times. Yeah, I thought it was a couple of times. And we find out Alex was a hot shot in the government circles in the civil service. Mm-hmm. And he is a junior ambassador to the U.S. from West Germany. Yeah, and he loved his job, and he gets hooked on pills. Now, I didn't see this at all as a callback to the Spider-Man issues. But since, we know that Layton and Michelinie were reading previous stuff, My assumption is they're calling back to Harry Osborn being hooked on the pills in the Spider-Man issue.
That makes sense.
And I did appreciate that as a comic reader and historian. Like, I thought, oh, that's a cool touch. I don't think the reader just picks that up out of nowhere, but I did think it was very cool. They did that.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I've been tracking.
Well, this is Alex. Alex dies, not Harry. Harry did not die in a car wreck, I don't think.
No.
Okay. I've not read tons of Spider-Man, so it may well have happened in the 2000s or something, but
no.
I see this because didn't Harry become like the Hobgoblin or something?
Yeah.
That's what I have to look forward to. Spoiler.
I do believe so.
Because I keep reading more Spider-Man.
Yes.
But we've got anyway, Alex wrecks. He dies in a terrible car wreck.
Yes.
And she says she doesn't know if it was him driving himself too hard with his work, no pun intended, or if it was the pills.
Never know.
And Tony's like, well, I didn't know, as he holds onto his drink. And she starts the tough love. And, blast it. That's not what I want. Don't feel sorry for me, and don't feel sorry for yourself. And she starts pretty much tearing into Tony and then saying, hey, let us help you. And we get some really great art here.
It is good art.
So as she's giving the monologue, Tony's looking out a window, looking away from her. She's trying to get him to listen. Then we get a close-up of Tony's face with just sweat beads rolling down it. And then finally, he turns to her and asks for help and hugs her. And as he's doing that, drops his drink and it crashes all over the floor. I will say, and then we get the montage, which we get the recovery montage. So
it's very speedy-like.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was about to say. So it was really, that's why I highlighted the article, because they had definitely read the Speedy story, right?
Yeah. Different comic company.
Yeah, they had definitely read the Green Lantern, Green Arrow story, and they knew about it. And so I found that this scene, it's not a recreation, but it's almost a recreation of exactly the Speedy stuff.
Yeah, it's very similar. He's not in the shower crying. He's just on the couch crying. He's
but the couch wasn't Black Canary holding him on the couch too.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that definitely mirror it.
And I will say this story keeps going, unlike the other story, right, where he just recovers from drugs magically from a heroin addiction and then goes on about his day. Right. I do appreciate this montage. I think it's too short, right? Like, as someone who has family members that suffer from alcoholism, this to me is rough to look at, because it's like in one page he's no longer using alcohol, right? Like, he's done.
It doesn't end that quick.
Now, it doesn't. Now, what we do know is that later on, as Michelinie and Layton come back to the book later in life and things like that, we do know that he does drink again. So it is more realistic to life, right? The character of Tony Stark does struggle with alcohol, so it doesn't. But if you look at this singular issue, man, it's quick, and then he's back to start his. It's like he went through the 12-step program, like a year of it in like a day, like 3 days. Yeah. And now he's doing the 12-step apology tour, right? Now he has to go back and apologize to everybody he's hurt. So he goes back to Jarvis, but then he just becomes a complete fucking asshole again.
Right. Hey, I'm sorry. I don't want to be a jerk again.
Yeah, he apologizes. So Tony goes back to him and he apologizes, and now we get a MacGuffin in the story, right? Apparently Jarvis had 2 shares of stock.
2 shares?
Yeah, it amazes me. Like,
he was rich.
And clearly the stock hadn't split in a long time, because the shares of Stark International must be worth like $10,000 a piece. But Jarvis has put them up as for collateral on a loan, because he needs to go back and help his sick mom. And Tony just flies out of control here.
Oh, no.
He's like, you got taken by a loan shark. And Jarvis was just trying to help his family while Tony was out being a drunk asshole. And then Tony's jumping all over him for being stupid.
No, Tony, it was you. You're the jerk. You didn't want to listen to your friend.
Well, and just the line. I'm sure it is, Jarvis. It sounds like you've been taken by a high-class loan shark. And he's like, I'm sorry, sir. You shouldn't be apologizing.
Yeah.
He should be, I never would have to do this if you had been paying attention and been respectful.
Yeah. Why do I have to? Why must I be responsible for you and responsible for me and responsible for knowing everything in the world? Come on, Tony, can't we all be adults?
So anyway, then we get Tony going back and he's like, I don't need the booze. I can handle this on my own without any counterfeit courage at all. So he clearly can't because he puts on the suit.
Yeah, because sometimes you have to put on your suit of armor to feel good about
he goes
yourself.
out to Rockefeller Plaza. Hey, I've been there.
Oh no, he's going to do something regrettable.
Well, before we get into that, I want to go back to that interview with Michelinie and Layton.
Okay.
And Michelinie says about this story, he says, actually, Iron Man at the time, we took him over what wasn't a top tier character. He wasn't Spider-Man or an Incredible Hulk. He was still a secondary character at that time, both sales-wise and perception-wise. If we had tried to make Peter Parker a drug addict or something like that, we might have hit more resistance. As I remember it, we were only given one criterion to follow. We were told to do it well. Marvel gave us a lot of trust. It was a good story, and they let us go. I don't remember, and Bob, maybe you do, so feel free to break in. It's like when we're talking. Uh-huh. But I don't remember any time when we were doing that story arc that Marvel said, don't do this or pull back on that. Uh-huh. And Bob Layton says, I think Marvel thought we were really onto something given where we started. Plus the idea was solid and it wouldn't be irreparable if we deal with this subject because it's a second tier character. And he says, if we deal with this subject, Tony Stark couldn't be Iron Man anymore. I think we presented it in a way that it made sense as long as we didn't have Tony Stark vomiting on camera or taking a piss in a flower pot, lobby of Stark International. We were going to be fine. Or maybe sitting on a billboard drinking.
There you go.
But they did do that in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, I mean, like they make it. I mean, okay, in the movie, like in the book, they don't make Tony Stark full 100% Arthur with an Iron Man suit. In the movie, they make Tony Stark Arthur with an Iron Man suit.
Yeah.
For those who listening and you don't know what I'm referring to when I say Arthur, look at the movie Arthur. Dudley Moore, amazing movie, freaking great. But what I think they're getting at too, they're 100% correct. They didn't make it so that with what they set up and do here, he's Tony Stark. He's got flaws. They just enhance them, bring them out a lot more, and show you this other, this deeper, what's really bringing out this other side, this darker, these darker moments in Tony Stark. And it's not that it's not repairable, or the fear of it not being repairable. It's that if it were to be repaired, he has to do it in a way that is human. And we do see that throughout the rest of the books. And it does give ground in the movies too, because you're continually on that hero's journey, even if it's within yourself.
And Bob Layton says later in the interview, he says, I think that's exactly it. It was a logical progression. It's almost like you asked the question, especially for a guy under that much pressure and a guy who has to deal with his own celebrity as well. Tony Stark was just as famous as Iron Man. Dave and I kind of touched on that in the story where Iron Man was always kind of a nice escape valve, and it was the way Tony Stark could become anonymous and go do things. In the course of the story, when he took that away from him and he couldn't be Iron Man anymore, that's when the pressure really started to build for him. And we did see that in the story.
Yeah. That's kind of like the light switch getting flipped and he just like, boom, off the rails.
I do think, though, this is where I'm going to disagree with the authors, respectively. I think that the beginning scene where he flies out of his window and the next scene are like him pissing in the alley.
Okay.
Because here we go. So he goes to the office of the Loan Shark. And I feel like this was taken right out of a Green Arrow, Green Lantern story, too.
Uh-huh.
Because I remember specifically like Green Arrow going in to deal with a tenement issue and he goes and attacks like the landlord. And so clearly they were reading that run, by the way. I just want to say that. And I love that they were reading that run because the Green Arrow Green Lantern run is one of the greatest runs of all time in comics. And I'm glad they're pulling from that source material. But he goes to this office of this executive and he breaks in the window, attacks him, destroys his office after trying to hand him money. and then says, very similar to how Green Arrow approached it in his story, hey, well, I'm going to report you to the police. If you say anything, he's like, I'm going to tell on you. And this guy is so scared, like he gives in. But in this case, he can't do anything about it because he's already sold the stock.
Yeah.
And he sold it to a man from a government agency, which is, of course, going to be S.H.I.E.L.D. So that's no secret because that's alluded to earlier. So Tony is distraught over the loss of these 2 shares. He flies back. And that's where I will say, like, I think the interviewer here in the Tomorrow's piece, when doing the piece, points out that this, Dan Johnson points out that this would have been fodder for the tabloid newspapers back in the day, even though we didn't have the internet.
Yeah.
And I think he's right. And so that's where I do think, I don't want to say sloppy storytelling because you're limited in what you can do, the amount of words you have, and there's only so many things you can clean up. But a little bit, maybe sloppy. Is sloppy the right word? I feel like there's some loose ends here that don't necessarily get followed up on later after this issue. Mm-hmm. So you read after these, right? In the past. Yeah. I definitely did. So we'll talk about what happens in the future issues in a second. But for now, we've got Tony comes back. Bethany and Jarvis are trying to do everything they can to help him up. Jarvis has coffee ready for him. Bethany's there to chat with him as a support system, and he immediately runs over to his alcohol. I think I probably would have gotten rid of all that stuff if I was trying to be a dry alcoholic. I don't think I would have still had the bar there.
Yeah, no, it would have been like, he's not committed yet. Yeah. That's how he's still struggling. That is the reality though. I mean, there's people that are like, all right, I'm done. I'm going cold turkey. And then there's people that are like, I can't get rid of it. Maybe somebody else might want to come over and have a drink. And it's like, but if you want to stop, then you got to get rid of it. And
that's how you when I stopped drinking caffeine.
And you still had it in the house?
Oh, no, I didn't.
But then you would come to the shop and then you'd go and get a Monster or something?
No, I would not. But I had to keep it away from me, right? I don't like coffee, so that makes it really easy. But I just, couldn't have that stuff around for a while. And then, my roommate eventually, had caffeine in the house. But I ask him basically, he'll put it in the fridge every once in a while, but I just ask him not to keep it in the fridge.
Don't keep it in the fridge.
And one of my roommates actually had some Coke Zero in the fridge for a while, and she grabbed one the other day. She's like, I drank the last Coke Zero, okay?
They're all gone.
Because I had complained about it. And I was just like, well, I didn't mean to complain about it. Just Coke Zero was my favorite drink, as you're well aware. And that's just, I don't want it around. So, but it doesn't mean, but I think, honestly, conquering the addiction means it can be there. And I have no desire to drink it, right? And I don't. So, obviously, I don't want to compare caffeine addiction to alcoholism. Yeah. But kind of.
Yeah, no, I mean, if all of a sudden you start, if somebody were to say, hey, do you want one of these? And you're like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. And then all of a sudden, like the next day, you're like, I gotta hit a slight headache because I didn't have my Coke Zero, or maybe, and then I'll, like that's a very unfortunate chain of events, and I would hate for somebody to come to Ocon and bring Dan a Coke Zero.
And for those of you that think I'm overblowing this, I would often drink like a Bang energy drink and 2 Monster Ultras in a day, and a Bang energy drink has twice the caffeine of a Monster. So I want you to think about that, or have one for breakfast and then one while I was halfway through a day of teaching some classes at work. It would be it was, and Greg knows. And then I'd need some after when I'd come see him and Ann at their store.
He'd come to the store and he's like, hey, do you guys need anything from, this is before we actually sold any beverages at the store. And then he would like come and he's like, do you need anything from the store next door? Because I'm going to go to the store next door to go get something to drink. So I was wondering if you guys need a drink from the store next door, because I need a drink from the store next door. Do you want something? And I'm like,
sure.
And then before I could even answer, you'd be back with like a handful of drinks. And I was like, holy crap, dude. And he's like,
I was drinking caffeine all the freaking time. It was insane.
Like, and then he'd be like, it's like the Wizard of Speed and Time.
So again, it's not it's not the same as alcohol, and I think the addiction is different. And you're probably not going to crash. Well, you could, I guess. I don't even want to say that. But there were times when I drank caffeine, which I really regret because I would be really hyped up, and I'm a very passionate guy, and I would get in pretty big arguments or react very strongly. And I still react strongly to things, but I think of the times I was drinking a lot of caffeine and I really would react strongly to things.
Oh, like the time you were watching the Little League Championship and I'm just joking. And
that never.
And you like got so angry that you like destroyed the whole entire picnic table.
That has never happened. So
I beg to differ.
Yeah, now you're overblowing some things, but yeah. So anyway, I hope none of you out there are ever dealing with addiction, but I just say like this is interesting. If you are, I just probably wouldn't keep the stuff around.
Yeah.
But okay, so the cool ending of the story, right? Tony decides not to take the drink. And of course, Bethany and Jarvis are very excited. They go for a ride and Bethany is still driving in the epilogue, but he has replaced his alcohol addiction with rich dark coffee.
Yeah.
So I guess we're good. We're back to caffeine. But now he has to deal with some of the consequences of what happened, and that will happen over the next few issues. So he's now dealing with the takeover attempt from S.H.I.E.L.D., and which kind of started before this run of issues, and it was alluded to during them, and then we'll get this takeover thing going on after these issues. But that's the end of this run.
Yeah.
And so there we go. We've figured out a little bit about what Bob Layton and David Michelinie thought of their story. What did you think?
I thought it was really good. I liked the introduction of the, I guess, of various characters, the reintroduction or retelling of Tony's, his Genesis story. I liked how we get from point A to point Z through this. It definitely is a really good arc. Covers a lot of ground, and it ends on a good note, but it's not a feel good note. It's okay. This is, he's got stuff he's dealing with. He's got a good outlook. He's got a positive outlook. But I mean, we know that he's Tony Stark.
Yeah. Well, and Michelinie, supporting what you said, says, the thing was Iron Man had friends like Captain America and so forth, but we never wrote Iron Man. We always plotted and wrote Tony Stark. And whether he was in a business suit or suit of armor, he was the same character, and we felt that was a very important focus of what we did. As far as creating a supporting cast, and I think this is what you were alluding to, right? Mm-hmm. We looked at it from a logical viewpoint and said, what do we need? As Tony Stark, he's not going to fly around. He needs someone to fly him. He needs a pilot. That was the genesis initially of Jim Rhodes. Mm-hmm. And we developed Jim, and then he became Tony's friend. And it was the same with Mrs. Arbogast. Tony needed an executive secretary. Mm-hmm. And Layton follows up with, and he also needed a woman who was immune to his persuasive powers, which is Bethany.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that Bethany is strong and just doesn't fawn all over Tony, right? In the sense that it's a mutual, throughout the issues, like in the scenes in the casino, they're mutually attracted to each other, right? Mm-hmm. Even to the point where Bethany has to do the suggesting, right? Like it's not Tony dragging her upstairs. It's Bethany suggesting, hey you should go upstairs. So I love the fact that we have two powerful female characters, in fact, introduced, and are great pieces of supporting cast.
Excuse me, 3, because you count the lady in the restroom who shows back up again later in
the casino.
In the casino. Yeah. That is 3 because she is so angry at Tony Stark. And she doesn't.
Well, that would be the 4th because we had Rhodey, Mrs. Arbogast, and
female character.
And Bethany. Oh, 3 female characters then.
3
okay, I got you. Yeah. Yes. So, I'm with you. The neat part of this story, as much as it getting into the demon in the bottle ending, is the fact that we got to see Michelinie and Layton world build.
Yeah. Which is really cool.
And do in a way that was interesting, right? Mm-hmm. And I think to their point, they're taking a character who was a second-tier character. And I think, Iron Man to me always had real peaks and valleys, right? The character would go up. And oftentimes it was when Bob Layton was on the book, right? The character would go up in sales. And then as soon as Bob Layton left the book, go down. And then they bring Bob Layton back. We need you. We need to bring Iron Man up. And Iron Man really doesn't become a great character until the movies come out. I shouldn't say great character, a top selling, number one selling character. That's factual.
Yeah, I mean, like in the public's eye, I would say, like, popularity wise, yes, he definitely becomes popular, becomes selling, and genuinely people are like, oh wow, this is a book I need to read. This is, give me more of this. That is true. I would say, like, I would say, I mean, he's always there. Like he's always on the periphery of a lot of things. So it's hard. So that's like, from that other standpoint, it's like, you're right. He's not, his books don't sell, but books with him in them would sell.
Yeah.
Why can't they count those?
Well, I would say, but he's a team guy, right? If you think about it, he could have easily, second tier character, had a book canceled. He did have books canceled multiple times.
Yeah.
In the 90s, 2000s, especially after the comic books collapsed in the 90s. So on, off. So yeah, I mean, to your point, do we celebrate? But is he best in a team? Is he best as an Avenger?
I think he's best because he's writing. He's interesting by himself, but yet a lot of what makes him a great part of, his story is so good sometimes is the movement between other characters, so being on a team, I think, definitely brings out those high points.
Well, on that note, we've wrapped up Iron Man 128, the Demon in a Bottle storyline, and it's about time to wrap up this episode of Funny Book Forensics. So, Greg, do you have anything to plug?
Well, come on down to the Retro Emporium and Kent, Washington, 328 West Meeker, and come see us at Ocon Expo
in Omaha, Nebraska.
I was so close.
July 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. And we will be there with wrestling superstar Rikishi. And because Greg screws up the promos so often, Rikishi, I think you need to give Greg the stink face.
I did it because you wanted me to mess it up.
Greg deserves the stink face.
You told me to mess it up.
If you're listening to this podcast right now, make sure you tweet to Rikishi, you message Rikishi on Facebook, and you let Rikishi know that Greg Smith, the author of Junior Bears of the Apocalypse, the author of Starlight, the podcaster of many podcasts, including this great podcast, Funny Book Forensics, needs the stink face. Make sure you message Rikishi and let him know.
Don't do that.
And of course, listen to more episodes of Funny Book Forensics, because that's why we're here.
Well, yeah, do that.
And at Ocon, we may even record live for you.
Oh, I think
so. Come see us. Come by our table, and I will give you a Funny Book Forensics sticker.
And see our hats.
Until I run out.
Well, we don't have hats for sale. Just to wear.
We don't have hats for sale, but we will have our own Funny Book Forensics hats. You're not supposed to promote the hats. We don't really have them.
No, I'm saying you could see our hats. The ones that we have. It's like when you like...
Yep. Well, on that note, hats and everything, we're wrapping this bad boy up. So we are out of here, Greg. Say goodbye.
Bye.